talk to Richard Boyd-Barrett.
You suggested that your Housing for All policy is working. I'd like you to try and explain that to three people who were sitting in the gallery, Tony, Radek and Shawnee, who are three of the 5 remaining tenants in the St Helens Court complex in Dún Laoghaire, who this Friday will be in the forecourts where a vulture fund will seek an enforcement order to evict them from their homes. They've never done anything wrong. They've always paid their rent. Once upon a time, they were part of a community of 20 tenants who all lived there, a fabulous community, and that community has been destroyed by the greed of 2 successive vulture funds, and I think it is fair to say that their lives have been ruined for 4 years by the greed and ruthlessness of vulture funds and the failure of your government and successive governments to actually address the causes of the persecution they've suffered at the hands of vulture funds. And their story is not just a story of their persecution, but to be honest, it tells the story of tens of thousands of people who were the victims of the housing crisis and the failure of your government and successive governments to deal with it. Why do I say that? Number one, this vulture fund has no reason to evict them, but they're allowed to evict them. Legally, they're allowed to just throw them out on the street. They pay the rent, they've never done anything wrong, and they can throw them out on the street. Now, that mightn't be so bad, although I should say they are HAP tenants, although Shawnee and Radek are both working. Tony worked, he's retired now, but worked as a healthcare worker. He's had a stroke as a result of the stress he suffered over the last 4 years at the hands of these vulture funds, but they're HAP recipients. In other words, they're socially housed, but they're not socially housed because you've been thrown out in the street and the council has no obligation to rehouse you. You end up in homeless accommodation, as they may well do. If there was social housing, it wouldn't be such a problem, except there's 5,000 families on the housing list waiting 10 to 20 years, and they're included in them. They get $9.60 on the homeless HAP rate to find alternative accommodation, but the problem is rents are more than €2,000 a month in our area. And you know what's really shocking about this? Not only are they going to end up on the street unless the government intervenes, but there's now only 5 tenants where there used to be 20, and for 2 years, 15 empty apartments, fully refurbished, that could house people on the housing list are sitting there empty because a greedy vulture fund can make more profit by sitting on empty properties and evicting other tenants than actually renting them to people who need them. Now I ask you, what are you going to do about that for them and for others who are facing similar persecution by vulture funds and the failure of governments to deal with the housing crisis?
First of all, the Deputy reference, and I think everything has to be done to protect tenants, and we're doing that through a variety of legislation and so forth. And in relation to St Helens Court, the notices, landlords issuing notices to vacate to 5 HAP tenants at St Helens Court, Dún Laoghaire. The Department of Housing are working with Dún Laoghaire Rathdown County Council to ensure that the 5 remaining households, 3 singles and 2 families, do not fall into homelessness as a result of their tenancies ending at St Helens Court. Viewings of available homes have been facilitated by the Place Finder services, and eligible households have been provided with access to the choice-based letting systems. 2 of the 5 families have recently been offered or are due to be offered alternative accommodation imminently. The Department of Housing advises that recent court procedures taken by the property owner to repossess the properties was adjourned. The Commission, so that's the existing position there, and we will continue to do that. Now, you know, housing assistance programme, the HAP programme, is state assistance to provide for social housing. And in our view, since this government came in 2 years ago, we have ramped up and will continue to ramp up the provision of social housing through direct bills. And we want to create a much larger social housing stock in the country. and the target this year is 9,000 social housing units between approved social housing bodies and the local authorities. And that is, to me, key in terms of rebalancing the number of tenants on HAP as opposed to those in local authority housing. We want more in approved social housing body rentals and in local authorities, and also then the cost rentals as well, which will be well below the market levels, to provide more of those also. Housing for All was launched last September, and very significant progress has been made in terms of 35,000 new commencements, as I said, the largest since 2008. And also a number of measures have been introduced under the Residential Tenancies Act with the objective of improving security of tenure for tenants. For example, the Tyrrellstown amendment provides that where a landlord proposes to sell 10 or more units within a single development at the same time, that sale is subject to the existing tenants remaining in situ, other than in exceptional circumstances. That aims to strike a balance between landlords' constitutionally protected rights to sell their property and achieve a fair return on their investment with a tenant's right to security of tenure, and provide security of tenure in the interests of the common social good. The Commission on Housing, which is now established, is examining issues such as tenure, standards, sustainability, quality of life issues in the provision of housing, and also examining wording for amendments to the Constitution in relation to the government's commitment to hold a referendum on housing, which I think will be important in terms of that balance between security of tenure and constitutional protection at the moment that currently exists.
Taoiseach, first of all, that's all very interesting. Will you guarantee that Tony, Radic and Shawnee and the other two households remaining in St Helens Court will not be thrown into emergency accommodation after the court proceedings on Friday? That's what they want to hear, okay? That's the commitment they need. But beyond that, why are the vulture funds allowed to do this? For nothing other than greed. Why are they allowed to evict people who've done nothing wrong and sit for 2 years on 15 empty properties when there are people crying out for accommodation? And it's even worse now. 5,000 people on the housing list and Ukrainian people fleeing a desperate situation of war. And this vulture fund is allowed to sit on empty properties and evict tenants that did nothing wrong. Now, you should step in and buy that block and force the purchase of it, but you need to change the law, because the Tyrrellstown Amendment, they got around it.
Thank you.
They tried to evict more than 10. The Tyrrellstown Amendment protected them, so they did. Then they went back and just said, we'll evict 7.
Taoiseach to respond, thank you.
Right, so give them that guarantee and do something to prevent vulture funds treating people like this.
Tyrrellstown Amendment was the optimal that could be achieved within the current constitutional framework, is my understanding on that. We have to work in the practical, real legal frameworks that we have to work in. And as I said, the Department of Housing, maybe have to change the Constitution. We're working on an amendment to the Constitution in terms of housing. And that's one of the tasks of the new Commission on Housing. But in the context of the Radic and Tony and the tenants that are the victims of this unacceptable behaviour, the Department of Housing is working with Dún Laoghaire Rathdown County Council to ensure that the 5 remaining households do not fall into homelessness as a result of their tenancies ending at St Helens Court. And that is work that is ongoing.